Hello, and welcome back to Literally Literary. If this is your first time joining us, be sure to check out our previous episodes. This episode, we are continuing our discussion on Brothers Sleep with Aldo Amparán. Today, we're joined by Aldo themselves to talk about their journey with their debut collection.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yay, I'm so excited.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Okay.
So Vanessa's going to read the bio.
The
Just
whole
to get
bio?
a little more.
With a personal touch.
Yes, with a personal touch at the end.
No, I don't
A little
want-
more about Aldo.
Aldo Amparán is a poet, writer, and translator born and raised in the border cities of El Paso, Texas, USA, and Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, Mexico. They are the recipient of the fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and Canto Mundo. Their work has been widely published in anthologies and literary journals, including AGNI, Best New Poets, Gulf Coast, Kenyan Review Online, Pluff Shares, Poetry Magazine, and elsewhere. They hold an MFA in creative writing from the University of Texas at El Paso. And I also work with Aldo at the Writing Center, and they're also teaching this semester a couple of classes.
NMSU.
Yeah, at NMSU.
NMSU.
Super busy.
Yeah. How has that been?
It's been wonderful.
That's great.
Yeah, I remember when I was terrified of teaching, but now I love it.
Yeah, good. That's so cool. I think I was the same way too.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, in the beginning.
Did you start teaching during your MFA?
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
great.
I remember Professor Chacon telling me, you're going to teach next semester. And I was like, I am? Little deer in the headlights.
Yeah, like, get ready. So you taught at UTEP
Yes.
for a couple of semesters, and then now you got this opportunity at NMSU.
Yeah, as a visiting assistant professor.
So tell us how NMSU is better than UTEP. Just kidding.
She went there, so
Yeah.
I graduated from NMSU.
she's a sleeper agent.
Yes, I know. I had to throw that in there. It's different, right?
It's different.
It's very different.
Though teaching at UTEP really helped prepare me like to build my syllabi and everything.
Are you teaching an intro to creative writing, or what classes are you?
Right now I'm teaching 2 poetry classes, an intro and forms and techniques class.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and next semester I'm going to teach a grad workshop.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, there's like little seminar class. Oh, they're the best.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, can I sign up for it? I'm dying to go back to school. Like, it's no secret. I always talk about it. My students are like, why? I can't wait to be done. And like, get out of here. I'm like, I just want to go back to school.
Well, I feel like workshops really help propel, like if you're writing a manuscript, they really help.
Yeah.
I miss that. I miss all the workshops and the community and the prompts. It really helps especially when you're blocked to like start you get going.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess that kind of leads into one of my first questions, Aldo. Just if you would please talk about your journey with this particular collection from beginning to publication, how it all started, when you started writing these poems, thinking of these poems. And we always like to ask writers, about their journey, because everyone's journey has been different. Like some people have the in or have networking or have taught at different institutions or have just self-promoted. And so it's always different. So we would like to hear about your particular journey.
This book, I always love to say the origin of the book, and the first poem that I wrote were the sequence of poems Primer for a View of the Sea. I actually wrote that poem or sequence of poems when I was an undergrad, about 10 years ago or so. I was in Professor Sasha Pimentel's class. And I really didn't think that the poem was going to make any book. But then I was looking for poems from my past, my undergrad years, and even for earlier than that. And I saw a possibility there, so I started editing it, and it made it to the book. Then I started putting together the collection during around my last year in the MFA, or probably my last 2 years. And yeah, one thing that was really interesting is that I was terrified of putting this out there. I was terrified of publishing. So I had the whole manuscript finished, at least the first draft of the manuscript, before I started sending them out to journals. So by the time the manuscript was ready, I actually had to be pushed a little bit to understand that these poems were ready to go out into the world. So I started, and I think that was really fortunate because I had a lot of material to send out, which is very important to have several pieces to send out to journals, and send a lot of simultaneous submissions, which helped get a little bit of attention.
Yeah.
And yeah.
How do you keep track of that? Do you have a spreadsheet maybe where you keep track of all your
I've seen
pieces,
some
or-
people who have that, and that's really smart.
Well, what I used back then when I started was Duotrope, which actually helped with the creation of those spreadsheets or those management of submissions. And also Submittable was really, really
Yeah.
helpful. Most of the submissions were done through Submittable, and that was easy to follow.
Yeah.
Some were email submissions, and that was followed through Duotrope.
Okay.
Cool. And what you were submitting, and you were talking about the majority of them being written in the last couple of years of MFA, were those all part of an earlier version of this, part of your thesis then?
Yes, yes. A shorter part of this
Yeah.
was made up my thesis.
I think that goes back to what you were saying about just missing being in that community of workshops and stuff. So I feel like a lot of students who are taking those workshops now have these manuscripts that are ready to go out there. They just need to find the publisher. Or they just need that push, like you had from Professor Sasha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I actually give a shout out to Sasha because
Yeah,
reading this, I
definitely.
felt a lot of, like I was reading some of her work, and this come from that school. I also mentioned Natalie's Intersapico as well.
Yeah,
Who,
definitely.
like, there's this
Two huge influences.
craft, right, of like cutting stuff down, and I see it here. So
Definitely.
cool.
Since you're talking about your MFA a little bit, I kind of wanted to ask you about your transition from fiction, because I know you started out writing fiction, and about your transition to then going into poetry.
Yeah, definitely. My thesis was originally going to be a collection of short stories about self-destructive relationships. But then in the middle of the MFA, I encountered two things. I really delved into the sense of line in poetry. And I discovered Ocean Vuong's Night Sky with Exit Wounds. And I was really inspired by that. Also, the ability or the kind of the privilege for poetry to be so fragmentary. So being able to jump from one image or scene or feeling to another in such compact space really helped me find that voice.
Yeah. I love that.
were the short stories that you had transformed into poems then, or did you just kind of toss those aside and start anew with the poetry? And are you thinking of coming back to short stories, or have you put that away?
So no short stories were transformed into poems. I do plan on coming back to that collection. That collection is more akin to maybe genre fiction, maybe horror or transgressive fiction,
Oh, that's cool.
which is one of my first influences in when it came to literature and writing. Actually, I think the only prose piece that was published in Pank magazine. It's called Grain, and many people consider that a prose poem, which is really interesting. But when I published it, I had in mind the idea that it was a piece of flash fiction.
Yeah. That's what Richie and I were talking about prior to recording today. Just like how some of our most favorite fiction is very poetic
Yeah.
or can be. And yeah, so that makes perfect sense. I'd love to read that. Yeah. Cool.
So I think we were kind of sidetracked. We were talking about the publication history. Talk about what drew you into Alice James books. And my understanding is that you had even submitted previously
Yes.
to winning.
Yes. So I submitted this collection in 2019, which was a year for the 29-year prize, which was the year I graduated from the MFA. Graduated in 2018. I submitted the manuscript to the Alice James Award, and it was actually a finalist for the 2019 award, which I found really, really exciting, really positive. And I just started editing this manuscript, adding a little bit more poems, taking out a few, editing line especially. And then I resubmitted it in, that year, 2019, for the 2020 award. And in around February, I received a call from a poet I actually really admired, Joseph Fasano. And he announced that I was a winner. And I was when I received a call from Alice James, I was not expecting them to say, "You're the winner of the Alice James Award." I was maybe, "Oh, we really love the book and would like to speak more about you," or even like it's an editor's choice, but like the winner. That just blew my mind.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Where were you when they called? Were you out and about? Or you?
Actually, in my room.
Okay.
It was kind of early, about 9 or 10ish. And I received a call, and I rarely answer calls because a lot of spam. And that I just had a hunch. I answered, and I was like super surprised.
Yeah, that's great.
And I was alone in my house, which was probably a good thing.
Were you yelling?
Yeah, I got to be a little energetic because I'm more subdued usually.
No, that's great to celebrate.
Yeah.
And out of curiosity, when you were a finalist the year before, did you receive any kind of feedback on
No,
the draft?
no.
Okay. So then
That was-
everything was your own then to decide
Yes.
to
Yeah, I
re-edit
was
it.
Yes.
going to ask that. Your editing process, like you said, you went back and did some editing on your own. Was it just self-editing? Did you
Yeah.
get help from anyone else? Like, what do you think could make this better?
Yeah, it was mostly myself, kind of adding on to what I had through the newer kind of poetry that I was reading, to the newer techniques, newer influences.
Okay.
Great. Yeah, you mentioned line breaks, working with that. There's a lot of playing around with form in this that
Yeah.
I hope we can get to later on. But
I do have a question. I guess I should ask that now. I did notice a lot of the poems are very technical, and therefore would be, great to study in one of those college like seminars, grad courses that we were talking about earlier. But do you find that it might exclude someone who might be more of a casual poetry reader, who might just pick up the book and doesn't have that background in poetry classes?
I would hope not. I would hope that the language itself, regardless of the forms and the line breaks and all those techniques, is enough to capture a reader's attention. I guess that would just be a hope, but I do know that many people consider poetry, especially poetry so focused on craft, to be a little, I don't know, creating a distance between them and the reader. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only reason I asked that. Like, I guess in thinking about our students, right? At EPCC, for example, Richie and I, am thinking like, how can we incorporate or bring this book into the classroom where these students haven't taken a poetry form and technique class yet, and so they wouldn't be able to see the nuances or those kinds of techniques that you're using, but can still read and focus on language and focus on feeling and those kinds of, I don't even want to say like elementary things, because they're not elementary things, but they can still take something from that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. And that also brings to mind how popular some Insta poetry has become, and how focused on feeling that kind of poetry is, instead of focusing on craft and technique and technicalities. So yeah, I understand how kind of like the technique might be a little bit creating a distance between the work and the reader. But I do hope that readers can find the language and the imagery and the feelings as powerful, and maybe bring a little bit more attention to that technique, that craft.
Yeah.
that's
Might
lovely.
just have to work at it a little bit more. But hopefully it also inspires them to want to understand how the poem works on a technical level. Right.
That's what I always encourage my students. Like, if you're having trouble with it, it's almost more rewarding when you can spend some time with it, and it's just like appreciating art, right? Because there's feeling in it as well, right?
Yeah.
Feeling's always first. I always think of was it E. Cummings' Feelings First, or who was that? Or Wordsworth even, but you hope too, once you put it out there, you just like, I hope there's a bold reader who will pick this up and want to find something through the words.
Definitely.
Yeah. Cool. It's a great question.
Yeah. You kind of mentioned a little bit about your editing, and in having taken your class, I noticed that a lot of the styles we were talking about in class and all of the different techniques we were talking about in class are really heavily used in the book. And I wanted to ask you if teaching those techniques and those styles in class really helped you during your editing process.
Definitely. And also the writing process. I try to teach everything that makes up my aesthetic. And and I do let my students know that I'm teaching from my own aesthetic, and there are a lot of ways to write, to create poetry. But yeah, it was the classes were really, really important for me to get to edit and to create, because I'm exploring my influences basically. I like to teach everyone that has influenced me creatively.
Yeah.
A lot of living authors.
Yes,
Too,
yes,
right?
definitely. about 90% of the readings that I teach are from living authors.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we do on the podcast as well. That's why
I know.
Yes.
cool. And what class was this again?
Yeah.
It was actually an intro to creative writing class.
Cool.
And who are
Yeah.
some of those authors? Let's give them their flowers.
Ooh, obviously Ocean Vuong
Yeah,
is one
Ocean
of them.
Jericho Brown.
Jericho Brown.
Oh, I just read. Oh my gosh. Yes. So good.
Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on all the names.
Natalie Santos Pico.
Yeah.
Also,
Yes.
Let me see the Virgin Cities or some other.
So what I teach are selections of poems. I think there was one from Virgin Cities and one from Lima Limon.
Oh, yes. Yes. It's a newer one, yeah.
Who else? I remember the pieces more than the names of the authors, and I feel
Did
really
you know
bad.
you were going to have a pop quiz
No, I
today?
didn't.
Vanessa?
Like I didn't.
Should
I wasn't
always
ready for
know.
this quiz.
You should always know I pop quiz you.
I know you guys are always quizzing me, and I'm like, I never know.
So just maybe last quiz question of this moment, since you're talking about a class you had. What's one of your biggest takeaways from their class?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good one.
But
Sorry, you're in the hot seat.
now I'm being interviewed. Oof. There was so many. Honestly, I had never written fiction.
Oh, yeah.
And so I got to practice that a little bit in their class. And I actually really enjoyed it. It was fun to like try something different, like from poetry.
Yeah.
Great.
Did you get an A in that class?
I did actually. I did.
It's like, now you're in the hot seat. No,
I
actually,
always, I always make a joke that it was basically just me, Aldo, and my sister in the class because we were the only ones that would ever talk.
Yeah.
Really.
Oh,
shy kids.
Yeah.
It's always the case.
she was.
Had you always been like that
she
in
was
school?
the ideal student.
No. And then I don't think I was like that in all. I wasn't
No.
even. I wasn't even like that in the majority of my classes. It was like only a handful of classes that I was like.
it's just because like I made it so welcoming. I think. I,
Okay, so we're talking about kind of using the framework of the publication history to kind of explore deeper, right?
Yeah.
Alice James book award, that's amazing. Congratulations again
Thank
on
you.
that.
Thank you
That's-
so much.
congrats.
especially as a debut, like that's wonderful.
Like, where do you go from here, Aldo?
I wonder the same.
Fiction. The fiction's
I
coming
do-
back.
I don't want to come back to that fiction, but I do have a manuscript that I'm working on. It's poetry.
Yes.
Awesome.
You wanted to talk about where this has taken them and readings and features and
Well, I thought you wanted to ask them more about the techniques. I feel like that's kind of where we're at, no?
Yeah.
yeah, sure. I mean, where did I want to go with this? Well, I mean, I had mentioned at least reading. I mean, there's so much to unpack in it, and that's one of the powers of poetry.
Yeah.
To pack in so much, through imagery, through form, and even how we break that form. There's so much of that in it that we talk about. I think is really interesting. But one thing that stood out to me were like kind of sometimes I saw glimpses of like cinematic techniques, and so much of that is based on the image and the way you frame something. And I see that a couple times here. I want to be able to see. I don't know why I didn't annotate it. I'm not against the annotation, by the way. I love writing in books, but for some reason I didn't, on this one. So I can't refer to anything in particular in the moment. But I wanted to talk about the influence of cinema in this, because even this feels like a movie title poster. Brothers Sleep.
Yeah, definitely. Cinema was one of the first influences that brought me to writing in general. Like my fiction writing was very indebted to cinema, so it's I think a little bit of an unconscious effort that there's a lot of cinematic technique in the poems. I do recognize them now. And there's even like the title for the last poem, This Room Will Still Exist, has been borrowed from Charlie Kaufman's
Oh yeah.
Synecdoche, New York, which is probably my favorite movie.
I was gonna ask you what your favorite movie was, or favorite director, because sometimes favorite movie is a hard question to answer. Synecdoche, New York.
Synecdoche, New York
Yeah.
is probably my favorite.
good one.
This room will still exist.
Can I ask you about the silencio one?
Yeah, the glossary.
Yes. It's
Yes.
one of the. Well, when I saw silencio, glossary for what you left unsaid, silencio 84, I just thought of Mulholland Drive. I don't know if that was.
No,
but
that was
part. No,
that was not
Okay.
intentional, but I can see that.
But that
Especially
part in
when
the movie.
because recently I went to see it at the Alamo,
yes.
and they had the warning that they give to keep silence in the theater was a repetition of the word silencio.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome. That's awesome. And unless you've seen it, and I feel like everyone who watched that movie at the Alamo has seen it before, and they're just going to see it on the big screen, so they
Yeah.
probably really appreciated that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's immediately what I thought of when I saw Silencio. That part of the movie, it's so moving. Anyway,
There's something you said right now that was really interesting. You said unconsciously and finding stuff here. And I think for young writers, I think writer's block, hesitation, all these things happen because I think people are trying to consciously create something. But how much of it is just trusting yourself and letting the language take you somewhere?
Yeah. I think poetry taught me to let go of that, because a lot of poetry is to follow the language, to allow the procession of one word to another to happen organically. So one of my favorite exercises that I started recently doing in class is I ask the students to write a series of words that either connect through sound or through image, without thinking of what that might mean. And usually a lot of students actually do end up having a connecting kind of center for the poem theme. But they sound so much better because of that continuation of sound and image.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah, that's cool.
A glossary, if you will, which
Yeah.
you know in this collection you have a lot of poems themed around the glossary. It's left unsaid. What kind of influenced that to be a framework throughout the collection?
That actually started as an exercise for myself to keep me from being a little bit blocked. So I gathered some words that I was interested in. It began with the idea of looking for definitions of words that would actually mean something derogatory. Like, for example, the word puñal, which is a derogatory term in Spanish for gay men. So I wanted to go to the Real Academia Española and look for the list of definitions. And based on those definitions, I wanted to come up with images or lines that the definition itself inspired me.
Yeah.
Of course, that strayed a little bit away from those derogatory terms and into more general words that I found interesting in the way they sounded or the way they looked in the page.
Oh yeah, okay. Experiential too in some moments. I've felt, but
yeah, I love this poem. This is one of my favorites. Do you have a favorite poem from the collection? I know
I
that's
have a
always
few
hard.
that I love to read in readings, but not a specific favorite.
it's like asking a parent, "Who's your favorite child?"
My favorites. I know. I liked this one. The glossary for what you left unsaid, puñal. That was one of my favorites. Yeah, it had so much meaning behind it, and I just remember feeling like almost heartbroken after reading it.
Yeah.
even though I've never experienced that, but I felt like I could experience that reading the poem at least.
Yeah, and that's also something that I love to teach in my classes. To teach that specificity can sometimes make the reader feel empathy
Yeah.
rather than being general and trying to be relatable to everyone by being general.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's exactly what happened. Yeah. That's exactly how I felt anyway. I think so. One of my last question. Oh, I thought you were laughing.
Oh no,
'Cause you're next.
I am actually.
I was going to ask, what was it like writing about personal moments and kind of in a sense having to relive them every time you're interviewed or doing a reading or a panel? How much of the collection is autobiographical? And so I don't know if you could talk a little bit about
course.
that.
Yeah, so the emotions in the collection are definitely autobiographical, but I do fictionalize a few, especially images and moments in there to try to separate myself. Because one of the hardest parts of writing this collection was allowing myself to be vulnerable. And that was like one of the main purposes that I wanted to write about this moment in my life, about my high school experiences, because that's when, one, I was struggling with grief, and two, I was struggling to come to terms with my sexuality and trying to come out. And I think by wanting to write about this moment in my life, I was trying to allow myself to be vulnerable after spending so long trying to hide emotions, especially during that moment that I'm writing here. I was really in pain, but I was very embarrassed to show that pain to to my family, to my mother, and I did rely a lot on friends to kind of vent these emotions, but I was really embarrassed of them with my family. And through this book, I just wanted to allow myself to present those emotions. But yeah, it was like
Since then, has your family read it and has
they haven't. They don't speak English,
okay.
so they don't speak English well enough to understand what is happening. But I'm very worried when there's a translation to Spanish because a friend of mine is working on it,
I was gonna ask that,
Yeah, I was gonna ask.
and I'm going to be very I don't know.
Yeah, that's
vulnerable.
hard. Sure.
Yeah.
Again, coming back to that vulnerability and like
Yeah.
how would they react and yeah.
And one of the elements that is actually kind of fictional in this is the image of my brother, because I am an only child. But when I was a child, I often felt very lonely. But for being an only child, for being raised by a single mother who worked a lot, and I always wanted to have a brother. So around the time of maybe sixth grade, middle school, high school, I developed this kind of, I don't know, custom to ask my very close friends if they wanted to be brothers. So I kind of formed like a found family in my closest friends. And one of my closest friends passed away. One of the friends that I called brother. So in this book, my attempt was to, through narrative, through poetic, actually make him brother.
That's beautiful.
Is it my turn?
I think so.
I feel like that's a weird
Yes,
transition.
I know.
Okay. So I guess my last question is just about all the events you've been doing. If you want to talk a little bit about that, if you have any upcoming ones too.
Yeah. I have a reading coming up April 28th at UTEP. And I'm going to be reading also in Lubbock. I think April 14. Yes.
At the university.
Poetry Month.
Yes.
Yeah.
Poetry Month.
Cool.
Yes.
Yeah, April. Busiest
I love
month.
I know. Cool. Lubbock, Texas. Ooh, tell us how that goes.
Oh, yeah.
And UTEP.
Should be interesting.
Yeah, I know. And then coming back from UTEP at the end of April. Cool.
And UTEP, is that going to be part of a series, or are there other readers in that?
I'm not sure. I know Sasha is helping organize it, and she had wanted to bring me for a while.
Cool.
So
How exciting.
yeah.
Awesome.
What about some of your past events?
So I read it at AWP. I had a panel there with 3 other Alice James poets. I was really fortunate. The stage was huge, very nerve-wracking.
But you did great. Vanessa and I were there. You did amazing.
It was so good.
It was great.
Thank you. I'm still terrified to see the recording.
How did you like AWP as a whole? How was it was your first time going, and then you were also presenting and you had a signing. You were just all over the place.
It was amazing. I got to meet a lot of poets that I really admired. Made a few friends with some of them, which was like one of my highlights of the trip.
Yeah.
The city was beautiful, Seattle. I love rainy days and cloudy days, so I was all thrilled about that.
Had you been there before?
No, it's my first time. And yeah, having a signing, having a panel was incredible, especially like for my first time. And I can't wait to return to another AWP.
Yeah. I love
Yeah,
that.
it was great.
Yeah, this was such a great time to attend.
Yeah. We all had the privilege to go as well in different areas. Like Richie and I were on a panel talking about this podcast, and Vanessa was networking the crap out of
I knew Vanessa was working hard. Yeah. Like I'd be doing something else, and then I'll see
She
like
earned her way.
10 new people liking the podcast page. I'm like, damn, Vanessa's working.
Yeah.
She's talking to people right now.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
awesome.
it was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that maybe in some future AWPs, I would be invited to off-site readings, which
Yeah.
are really fun. So I'm kind of putting it out there, manifesting it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you go to any offsite reading?
I did go.
Yeah.
I went to a few. They were like amazing. I would like to be part of one of them.
They're more
Yeah.
casual. It's not this huge stage and a huge
I
ballroom.
know.
So yeah, I can see how that would be like a little coffee shop or something and just reading. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yes.
Well, I'm so glad that we got to experience that together and that you came in and talked about your collection with us, Aldo. We're thrilled to have you here. We want to congratulate you again
Yes.
on your awards and your collection, and we can't wait to read the next thing.
Ooh, I know. I'm so excited.
Thank you so much.
I think I've read some of the pieces.
Yes, you did.
Ooh. A sneak preview. Okay, cool. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming, Aldo.
Thank you for having me.
And do you have a website or a place where people can contact you or check out, like, keep up with your work?
Yeah, aldoamparan.com. And I'm on Instagram and Twitter at SkyGoneOut.
Excellent. Cool.
Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you.
Outro.
Spit it.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Literally Literary, recorded at Power at the Pass and brought to you by Border Census. This episode, we continued our discussion on Brother Sleep with an interview with Aldo Amparán. If you haven't read it, we hope we inspire you to pick up a copy. Join us on our next episode and follow us on Instagram at literallyliterary.ep and on Twitter at literallylitep.